Hello, God bless you. Across the last few weeks, I have received a response from Brother Richard. And although I've been wrestling with family life and perhaps the next few hot points of some of the next videos I'm doing, I wanted to read for you Richard's response to me and kind of go over some of the stuff with you because I feel like more than just edifying him, he's asking some really good questions, and it can certainly edify all of you. So, Brother Richard, in response to my last video, says, Joe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I venture to say that the below could answer any question I put before you and hold true. He put this in quotes. Trust the Lord, pray constantly with persistence for his will, and he will present situations in divine timing and be your words if you'll just fully submit. Hold on to the reins, grab the reins in those moments. And I think that's very well put. But he continues and goes on to say, that doesn't mean I don't want to pick my soul for questions, though, and these will be me fully humiliating myself. I don't think so, Richard, but he says, for the glory of God, so please do not pardon my ignorance. Use it to his glory. You've likely touched on these in your video series, and I'm not putting two and two together, so maybe a review of what we learned, he calls it. So he asked me 4 questions in the end. He says, do you recommend evangelizing to the unwilling? What about when you can't help but see and speak to the person daily, like family? They don't want to hear it, and making small talk with them for a lifetime seems mind-numbing. Many have told me to evangelize with my actions. Can you talk examples of those actions that have brought forth noticeable change in the unwilling? So, first off, the guess is pretty much true. I don't recommend evangelizing to the unwilling. It's not going to edify when someone is set against you to try and harp at them or bark at them. There's one exception to this, though, and John 5, Jesus' admonition to the Pharisees here is a good example of that. When someone clearly knows better, when they are, well, I'll say it like this. The Pharisees were keepers, or supposed to be keepers of the Jewish people and of the temple and of the way of God. So they were in a position to be responsible for and know the will of God and how to be clean before him. So since they were in a place of responsibility there, like a pastor or church faculty or someone who's in leadership in a church, that's a good example for today, when they clearly should know better, and yet they're working against the truth, or their doctrine is harming people or sowing confusion and sowing discord. When you see people who are supposed to be godly not being that way, we should expose that problem. And it's not to say we should point our finger and condemn people, but I bring up John 5 as an example. I only wrote down the hot points of the issue, but starting in verse 19 of John 5, Jesus testifies that he's doing what God shows, the same things that he does. Through verse 20 and 21, he declares that the Son gives life as the Father gives life. He spells out the workings of what he's ministering to people for these folks in patience. Verse 23, he says that we're to honor the Son just as we honor the Father. 24 through 29 explains that about the Son and what the resurrection is that the Pharisees believed in. Verse 30 says he does everything by the Father's will. And from there to verse 39, he speaks of all the things that testify of the truth of what he's saying and doing. And verse 40 is the clincher. He does address the Pharisees. But you, he says, are not willing to come to me that you may have life. So he's giving them fair warning that despite the fact they're supposed to hold on to these things, and the very things he's representing, they still won't receive him. And verse 41 through 47 explains that Moses is also his accuser because Moses wrote about him and says, "But if you don't believe the writings, how will you believe my words?" And tells him plainly, like, if you can't believe this, then you're not going to be able to believe me. And you can, for folks in the know who are supposed to be responsible for the Lord Jesus' gospel and for doing the workings out of their life to God's glory and being in his will, when they're falling out of that and they're acting proud about it, or they're strong in their representation of an error, feel free to explain to people what and why and how, if you understand, to edify. If the Spirit gives you utterance to edify someone in the know, do it. You can tell them they're not willing to hear it and that they should be willing. But this is not the same as the unbeliever. So an unwilling unbeliever is not going to be prone to hear this stuff. And in fact, they will be put off by it because their tendency is to not want to hear it in the first place. So Richard is right. We have to do this stuff by our actions. And what he's asking me is for examples of those actions that brought forth noticeable change in the unwilling. So I'm going to bring up something and expand on it that I only touched on in my Gospel of Peace series. It's the feet of those who preach the gospel. In Isaiah 52, verse 7, he says, "How beautiful upon the mountains are the feet of him who brings good news, who proclaims peace, who brings glad tidings of good things, who proclaims salvation, who says to Zion, your God reigns." The book of Nahum gives, chapter 1, verse 15, adds another detail to this. He says, "Behold on the mountains the feet of him who brings good tidings, who proclaims peace. O Judah, keep your appointed feast, perform your vows, for the wicked one shall no more pass through you. He is utterly cut off." Paul in Romans echoes these things and sort of simplifies it and applies it to the gospel. And he says, "How beautiful are the feet of those who preach the gospel of peace." Now, within these three passages, you see everything that it's going to take as a generalization, but I'll spell them out for you for qualitative purpose, because it is hard to be the gospel in the presence of the unwilling and preach by the way we're living, not just with our lips. So what Isaiah and Nahum and Paul are saying is the way you walk, the true speaker of the gospel is someone who is walking that out. He says, "How beautiful are those feet." So everything you're doing as a peacemaker, as a proclaimer of salvation, as someone who's trying to show the truthful value of Christ, his ministry, the accomplishment the Lord gave to him, the authority he was given to take his life back up and save us in that same fashion as he was brought to life in God. We are supposed to do with our body and our heart and our hands. The walk we live is supposed to show people outright by our conduct the value of it. So when someone when someone loses their temper with me, I'm to have grace for that. I'm supposed to have foreknowledge of what the mistake is in people's hearts and minds that causes outbursts of anger, that causes offenses, and I am supposed to have mercy on that. The oppressor on you, the unjust judge, the unfair people that do you wrong in life, does the Bible not say that we are to love those people and treat them well and endure it and be grace in the face of all that stuff? Our inclination as people is to counterattack, is to fall into the very thing they want us to fall into, which is the striving, which is the arguing, which is the contention, which is the anger, which is the hate, the judgment, the condemnation. We know people are doing us wrong. But what good is it if we just do that same wrong back? There's nothing godly about that. So we endure all things for Christ. And when we are abused, we forgive them. We love them anyway. And that's foremost. You cannot have beautiful feet if you're not acting in the first place from a posture of mercy, forgiveness, and grace. Now, assuming you are in that posture, if someone's attacking your theological belief, it usually has a point, and they'll reveal that to you. They'll at least tell you, like, look, this is this and this that, and I don't want to hear it. But somewhere in there, they'll give you the key to what they do want to see. My wife and I were, in our younger portion of our lives, angry people and judgmental people. And when either of us slips on the other, both of us know now that really what we're looking for is gentleness. We get upset because things are too rough, and then we're rough back, and that's a mistake. So what we meet each other with is just a moment's patience and a moment's mercy. Either of us gets offended back, it's over. We have to minister to the other person's heart. And if we're going to do that, we need to know what the trouble in their heart is. So when an unbeliever doesn't like that God somewhere in the Bible seems to have condoned baby killing, when evil things happen to good people and they don't understand the patience of the saints and the oppression of the wicked, and the fact that that happens so we can have a choice and be alive and it's something to endure till the things are done. When even people who understand the way these things work can't always say it right. So we need to show that a godly person is supposed to walk in mercy, is supposed to walk in love, is supposed to minister to people's hearts. And when someone's heart is hurt, you treat it. You treat it by the flavor that they're being inflicted. If someone feels rejection, that means don't push them away. Bring them into your presence. Accept that they are worthy of love and care and grace, just as the way the Lord accepts us in love and care and grace. If someone's being asked too many questions, like if, I don't know, I a lot of times, my wife does medical billing, and she has to answer a million questions from her team, her faculty, their customers, a myriad of people, and sometimes the amount of inquisition on them is too much. So sometimes ministering to someone is not asking questions, is just simply looking at them and doing something in a providing fashion and an uplifting fashion without saying a word. Sometimes people just want peace and quiet. Sometimes, I'm doing this impromptu, so to conjure up examples is tough, but there's times when people are full of hate and they want to feel accomplished at putting that hate on someone else, making someone feel as bad as them. So if you endure that, and you say, that's okay, I forgive you, let's move on from this, or let's get right from this, or, does that make you feel better now that I'm down with you? What can I do to bring you out of that? What can I do to help that feeling of hate? Is there anything I can do to heal that in you? Sometimes you just have to ask. It's an enduring in a fashion that's dynamic. It doesn't have a set amount of rules, and the worst part about finding examples is you really know when you're moved in your heart. So when you're standing there before somebody in the midst of their own uncleanness with an unwilling ear to hear right words, when you're all messed up, you might not always know what you need, but somewhere in your posture, you're showing it. And if you're someone who loves people and deals well with them, you can accommodate people even in their body language. You can change your posture or the way you look at them in a way you know will help them. Any gesture, any action, anything that can recover the damage in someone, faint-hearted, broken-hearted, all the people that are injured in life just need some TLC. The liars and the oppressors and the angry people and those who want to do harm, even if you're not going to reach them, they need to see the weakness in those actions, because humans are very resilient. And I'm sure every single one of you watching this has taken plenty of abuse in life. But when you can take that abuse and stand in loving grace anyway, and show them that that can only hurt my feelings and only for so long, and it doesn't accomplish anything to be harmful in that way. I've seen many people disarmed by their wickedness simply having no effect. I know Sister Emily Ribkowitz from Telegram is in the midst of this herself right now. She's been dealing with something with her husband, and when he challenges her, the only thing she can do is say the simple truth of the situation and be graceful and treat him well anyway. And she has testified several times to the fact that that has completely disarmed him and caused him to not only apologize, but to praise her loving grace. So I can't speak as well as I should. I kind of just blabbered on. I didn't really say much. But the fact is, it's difficult to know just what to do until you're in the situation. But if you have the Lord's regard about you as you're walking into that situation, when it begins happening, deep down in the midst of you, when you're like, oh, Lord, here it is. Stand with me. Lend me your grace if I don't have it. Give me answer if I need it. Cause me to do what will heal, rather than say what will heal, if speaking will fail. And you'll be surprised at just trusting the Lord in those moments to provide it for you will come through. Richard's initial statement was true. If you cling to the Lord in those moments, he will give you answer, and he will give you actions that will edify. But you can only read it in the moment. I'm a pretty consistent person day to day, but what I might need today on my insides isn't the same as tomorrow. We shuck and jive and move through life in a way that different stuff bothers the same people different days. Different anti-religion people are up in arms about the concerns of religious people differently on different days. It's almost an impossible task to make a rule book for how to do this. But this is why there's so much focus in my videos on actually having trust for the Lord in the first place. If you do not walk into a situation knowing the Lord is bearing witness to you and knowing that he's willing to provide for you if you need it in those situations, in him, if you are walking in him and you are asking for provision in him to edify someone, in him to his purpose, not your agenda, and you fully know that if what you're doing is aligning with his will, that it will come forth, then it will. But if we sit around doubting and we sit around worrying about how to deal with it in our flesh, by our flesh, we're going to fail. And each of us has those moments of confusion where we don't know what to do, and instead of looking to the Lord, we look to ourselves and our thinking and our feelings for our actions, and things almost always get out of hand. Sometimes we'll get lucky and maybe navigate it well in our flesh. But by gosh, we should not be taking responsibility for the Lord's truth without literally holding the Lord's hand while we do it. So it's careful business. It's hard to get through, but it's doable. Now then, I need to move on because this video is going to get way too long if I don't. Richard says, I so desperately want to scream his praises from the rooftops like a fool for Christ. I feel like society's trapped me into this American dream of evangelizing either online and hoping for the willing to read it, or blurting out Jesus' name or God bless you when in public and hoping it turns into something more. I genuinely don't want to hurt someone by hitting them on the head with the proverbial Bible and have them run away. But I also don't want to disgrace the Lord by not speaking truth to those who desperately need to hear it. How do I get past my cowardice and not chase them away at the same time when I feel convicted or when someone comes to me with grievances toward the Lord, and I'm not the confrontational type. I'm not always bold walking down the street. Only a few times in my life have I been in somewhere where a bunch of people could hear me, and I started shouting. You know what I mean? Who grieves? Who is heartbroken? Who is lonely? Who is oppressed by this world? Come out and speak with me and let me touch your heart. Let the Lord speak to you today. Come fellowship with me. All who can hear, come. It's hard to do those things, especially because the proclivity, like your first instinct is to say, well, I'm just gonna be chased off or ignored. It's gonna be embarrassing and stupid, and it's not gonna go anywhere. All that is because so many of us do that without clinging to the Lord as we do it. I went out on a prayer mission with the lead pastor of my local church and one of his friends from another church, and we prayed for provision. We prayed for leading guidance, and we prayed that His will and His glory would be shown and be done that day. And we spent the larger part of all morning walking around neighborhoods, praying over the neighborhoods, looking for people to talk to and pray with. And it was mysteriously silent all morning. But in the afternoon, almost towards the end of what we were doing, right as everything was closing out, I'll spare you the details because I'm on to another point. But the point is, very powerful provision was given in two different places over people that we recognized who just spontaneously were in our way and had a concern, and one of them was in danger. And the Lord was scooping them out of the mire, pulling them up and setting them on a rock through our actions because we were out there willing. We had no direction. We didn't know where we were going. We didn't know how it was going to work out or who needed edification. All we did was be willing and go out there and pray and talk to people. And it just so happened we have a double confirmation of two people who were in prayer to the Lord for the thing that they received that day. And it was not to our merit, not to our thinking. The Lord literally just ended up putting us there. So it will happen. The Lord gives you provision for these things, just like Richie said in his shortened explanation for us himself. But the real answer to this question, when you're afraid, or you're someone who's not bold in speech to go out and just yell and scream and shout, the one thing you should be willing to do is know what the Lord's done for you, to have your testimony prepared to share. Because the most relatable thing people can receive from you, if you don't know what else to do, is just share what has happened to you. And almost always, I've been a pretty sturdy guy in my life. I haven't fallen into too many terrible calamities. I only had to have my life ruined once by the Lord for me to hand it over to Him, and thank goodness. But through all the things that have happened to me and all the testimony I have, it almost always relates to the plight of the people that I'm talking to. So if I have someone I'm moved in my heart to speak to, and I don't have a specific word being pushed through me by the Spirit of the Lord, I share my testimony. I share the relevant details of my testimony that relate to them and engage them, so that they might grow willingness if they have a non-negative amount of it. And people who are weakly unwilling can be brought to willingness, but we should be very patient and gentle with it. Jesus didn't go into the house of the sinners and the tax collectors and immediately start pointing out all of their dirt. He just went and walked the right way, showed them the truth, gained their acceptance by the integrity of it, and caused them to follow Him by His example, not by being told their example was poor. So who we are and how we come to Christ and what we know about that applicably in our life is the most valuable thing we can do when we're out in the general area of people who might need to be edified. Richard's number 3 of 4. Many churches seem to be filled to the brim with lukewarm and just a handful of narrow path. I see what you're saying. Filled to the brim with lukewarm people. and really only a few that are really walking with Christ. It would seem like this would be the low-hanging fruit in evangelism. Tons of people that are delusional of the truth, that, they don't know that they're not walking in the truth. So if we can really real talk with anyone, wouldn't it be them? And how do we show them that loving comfort to guide them back to the narrow path and not come across as Job's friends and end up hurting more than helping? So this gets into the real sticky part of all of our lives. We don't like being told when we do something wrong. And more often than not, in the body, with everybody in life, no one wants to hear that, and very few people like to admit that they were wrong. Now, I'm going to make a blanket assumption here that those who even are religious or nominal or book club Christians have some kind of conviction because they want to accept the truth of the good things. Now, when Jesus was talking to any certain sinner and he was spelling out what they'd done, he spoke to the thing. If I put my hand on a hot stove and burn my hand, and someone comes around the corner and says, "Oh, you burned your hand," I'm not going to be mad at that. But if they come around and say, "What were you thinking? You shouldn't have done that," you're going to feel stupid. You're going to want to be offended. So the one thing you can do for yourself when you're dealing with the lukewarm, which are the low-hanging fruit and are the people we also need to be evangelizing to, because they need to be opened up to the way of Christ, not just the knowledge of him. We should simply deal with the what's what and the whys. And it's rare these days I find many Christians that understand why. It's hard to understand the actual dynamic workings and the value and the functions of these things. But the longer we're in them, the more we've experienced it, we can come up with terms and relatable things to apply it practically. So if someone is in the midst in their sin, a great example, Church Controversy 101, homosexuality in the church. These people don't want to say it's wrong. They want to pick it the way the words are translated in the places where the Bible says it's wrong. And the biggest problem with it is through the times of the ancients and through the times of Scripture and before our modern age, there was sort of this expectation, and you can see it in the writing, but it's not very clearly spelled out, that people should understand why already. And it's not spelled out for us in this sort of hand-holding fashion like a lot of people need in the modern age. But the fact is, all lust is wrong because it causes obsession in the flesh, and it causes you to waste your time trying to satisfy this thing that has a very small a portion to do with your life. You see many upright people of God in the Bible who did sexually immoral things. Solomon had like a whole harem, and there's nowhere to say, like, nowhere in the commandments is that thou shalt not have a harem. But it's a dishonor to a wife that you have if you need a bunch of other women. He had sexual obsession that was sinful, and by that same nature, any lustful sexual obsession is sinful. And the gayness of it, or the non-gayness of it, doesn't change the fact that if you have a sexual satisfaction requirement, if you have to base your romance on a thing you need to get or do and be, or a certain flavor of this thing you need to have, it's unclean because it causes you to have an unclear sight on what matters and what doesn't. It puts your wants over and above the person you're trying to be romantic with, and it causes you to be a user of them. It steals away the love from a pure heart that romance is supposed to have in a marriage or in that whole spectrum. It's wrong by its nature because it causes crooked things in us. And the more specific our obsession is, the worse it is. So It's clear that homosexuality is a sin by its nature. It's said explicitly that it is a sin in the Bible, but it's the thing it does to us that makes it sinful. You will never find a homosexual person that is not sexually obsessed. But by that same token, you will never find a sexually obsessed person of any flavor who's not sexually obsessed. That should be the root of what it does to us needs to be spelled out, and the working problem of it needs to be shown if it's going to have practical value for the people doing it. So we don't need to dial into the person committing the sin. We need to bring to light what it does and show what the truth is in order to edify. So when we're going to speak to a lukewarm or slipping person who wants to proclaim Christ, we need to show the value of the contrary thing and bring to light the thing that's causing harm and be able to explain why and what it's doing. And if we can't do that, then we shouldn't be preaching to them, because the Lord didn't give us utterance to do it, and we don't have a satisfying answer that's truthful. So walk carefully with the lukewarm as much as anyone. We are supposed to. Paul and Peter both say that judgment starts with the house of God, and we're supposed to be watchmen for each other. We're supposed to call each other out, and we're supposed to dissociate with people who claim Christ and yet live contrary to him. But inasmuch as we can, we need to have peace with people. And if you can edify, and it's given to you in your heart, or you're moved to try and edify that person with actual substantial ministry that can do it. If you look at a situation and you know by the Lord, you're like, I can edify that. The Lord can, we can do this right now. If you know it, then do it. But if you have no idea how to get over to that person, what's wrong with what they're doing, why bother doing it? You're just going to make them feel bad and offend them, and that we put off. All of this is for edification to the glory of God. So when we're preaching to any of these people, we're preaching to their heart, and we're trying to reveal what the Lord has for them. We're not condemners. Jesus said himself, if anyone does not receive me and rejects me, I don't judge him. There's one that does judge him. My word will judge him in the last day. Jesus knows that the word God gave him to preach while he was on earth is the standard, is what we're going to be held to. He doesn't have to bother condemning people. The word will do that for him. He's been given all authority so that what he says goes. So if we don't understand why he said what he said and what its value is, we're not in a position to teach anyone. We're all supposed to be ministers to each other, but we're supposed to minister to hearts. And sometimes we don't have a gospel put in that day to proclaim. Sometimes we have a movement in our heart to heal someone. Sometimes we have movement to encourage the right things in someone. Sometimes we have provision to show how someone can escape from their poor position. But every day is different. This ministry online has changed dramatically, and I'm in a position of ministry transition now also. I'm going to keep on YouTube because I love doing this stuff. It helps me practice for real life. But I need to reach a different kind of audience than people who enjoy edifying videos on YouTube. I need to get my hands out there and get dirty and, throw away some of my provision, not to waste it, but throw it out, cast my bread upon the waters, and start being charitable to these people that are actually out on the street adjacent to me suffering. I need to do Isaiah 58 more. I need to do the sharing of my portion, and whatever I abstain from, give that as a blessing, not just do the right things. Live the right things. And I know this. It's something I've been aware of for a long time that I practice. But I need to do more of real life ministry. I need to get out on the street more and I need to figure out how to show people this stuff for myself. And this is my encouragement to do it. But as far as YouTube goes, I think after this, I'm going to put up, I have a short dedication video I did for Sister Leah at the request of Lisa on Telegram. I tried to give her enough time to put her video together and put it out because it was something she asked to do. But I'm going to put up after this the dedication, did a video I did for Sister Leah not long ago. But I'm going to sort of change tactic. I'm going to get back to some certain basics because really, Brother Richard's right. Right now, the low-hanging fruit is who we should all be evangelizing to and administering to because the body needs to be strengthened right now. It's clear that many churches are expanding, splitting, changing their doctrine. Like there's this weird, it's the yeast through the dough. There's this weird expansion right now of nominal Christianity or side Christianity, and religion's getting real religious-y and going all different directions. So we need to try and strengthen those we can while we can. So I want to do a lot more focus on the simpler things and better understanding of what that walk is anyway in us. I may end up doing some I'll call it anti-theological discourse, kind of throwing away some of the ways we box ourselves into belief and where the Bible implies that more than that is true or something larger than that is true, or just kind of try to open up the valuable things in Scripture so we might be able to gain wisdom in the Lord's perspective through it. But by and large, I need to increase my ministry effort. I need to unify it. Where I'm not on YouTube, I'm on a different subject on Reddit. Where I'm not on Reddit, I'm on a different subject on Telegram. In the writings I do that are rarely shared out, they're a completely different flavor. I'm on 4 topics at once, and I can't really get a unified effort going. So I need to revamp what I'm doing. So I'm going to return back to certain 101 basics that are even good for mature Christians. But that speaks to the last thing that Brother Richard said. He says, one more. This is question 4. He didn't number it. The devil has people blinded and complacent in the American dream. They live the rat race and talk a whole lot of nothing. What is a tip to wake them up from that slumber? Now, he doesn't realize this, but all but one of those statements apply to me. I have a family. I am your standardized lower middle class American person. My wife and I both work full-time jobs. Even though our heart is not in it, we're stuck in the rat race. The American dream has effectively, functionally consumed a lot of the time we put into life that should be given to the things of the Lord. Now, I'm someone who, I don't mind, I'll put my Bible out on the sales counter. I'm a sales manager, which I'm not very proud of. Maybe we'll have a testimony talk about that another day. But I make sure that I show, just like I do in my ministry, the working value of what's going to benefit people while they're shopping with me. I'm not afraid to put Christ values and say the Lord Jesus during a sales interaction. It turns into a ministry opportunity in many church many times. But I have to put the Lord at the center of the mundane things I'm doing so that I don't live a life void of Him. The one thing to my merit is I try to talk more than just nothing. I try to only speak and do things that have value in my business to the glory of God, in my worship to the glory of God, in my ministry to the glory of God. And it is very difficult to wake someone up from the slumber of the rat race of the American dream. Because, and this is the toughest aspect, they've made selfish gain glorifiable. They've made it acceptable. They've made it a working standard for our life. So people who are piling up material things for themselves have a form of selfishness that's very tough to beat. And that is a problem just as I've made an example of myself in that, it's a problem for the body. So I'm going to spend I'm not going to relate it to evangelism, but I'm probably going to spend a fair amount of time talking about selfishness in our worship and our walk, and selfishness in the layperson that prevents us from growing in the Lord, because those things are very easy to fall into, and they're a huge trap. They hinder us greatly. They quench the Spirit in us almost every day, where when we're out for ourselves and don't realize, it's a nightmare, and I know a lot of you see it. So we'll spend time on selfishness and spiritual blindness as we go on. I'm sorry I didn't just answer that question right off, Brother Richard, but this video is like super long now. So I love you all. Christ be with you. Thank you for taking the time with me, and I'll be back pretty soon with some new content. Take care. Bye-bye, folks.